If you like our stories, please like, comment, and subscribe. Harry stepped off the creaking carriage and into the cool evening air, a knot of apprehension tightening in his stomach. The towering silhouette of Hogwarts rose before him, all pointed spires and flickering lights that promised both wonder and danger. Most students whispered excitedly about the new school year, anxious to reunite with friends or impress favored professors. Harry, however, felt the weight of unspoken secrets pressing down on him like a shroud. He was returning to Hogwarts as a member of Slytherin House, something that had been a shock to many when his sorting occurred the previous year. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Some insisted he was destined for greatness, while others muttered that he courted darkness. The truth was infinitely more complicated. During his first year, Harry had uncovered forbidden knowledge and laid claim to a powerful relic, one that had awakened something deep and dangerous within him. As students filed into the great hall for the welcoming feast, Harry slid into his seat at the Slytherin table. Around him, green and silver banners shone in the flickering candlelight. Draco Malfoy, his pale features set in an unreadable expression, offered Harry a cool nod of acknowledgement. Their shared house had thrust them together, yet rivalry simmered beneath the surface of their every interaction. A hush spread across the hall as the headmaster, an aged wizard with an enigmatic presence, stood to deliver his start-of-term words. Candles drifted overhead, the enchanted ceiling mirroring a twilight sky just on the edge of storm clouds. Harry hardly heard the headmaster's address. His thoughts drifted to the hidden chamber deep beneath the school, to the monstrous creature he had secretly bent to his will. Over the summer, he had dreamed of that serpent coiling through shadowy corridors, waiting only for his command. Dinner passed in a blur of chatter and clinking plates. Every so often, a student from another table would cast a wary glance in Harry's direction. In Slytherin, a few classmates gazed at him with curiosity or admiration, as if hoping to glean how one so young had managed feats no ordinary student could. Others, especially older students, eyed him with suspicion, uneasy about the rumors that Harry had sealed away something dark at the end of last year. That night, in the dimly lit Slytherin common room, the conversation revolved around a new defense against the dark arts teacher, rumored to have traveled far and wide. Draco and his circle lounged on velvet couches, exchanging smug remarks. Harry kept to himself, seated by the emerald-tinted fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows against the dungeon walls. Snape, the head of Slytherin House, made a rare appearance just before curfew. His dark robe swept across the stone floor as he took in his students with a critical eye. When his gaze settled on Harry, it lingered a moment too long, as though searching for confirmation of the rumors. Harry stared back without flinching. He could not tell if Snape was protecting him or scrutinizing him. Perhaps both. Later that evening, as Harry lay awake in his four-poster bed, he felt the old pull, a tug at the edge of his consciousness, urging him to return to the secret place that only he and a silent beast knew. He recalled the final moments of last year, his heart racing, his wand trembling, and a silent negotiation sealed in Parseltongue. Though he had left the chamber with no immediate intent to abuse its power, the temptation to hold on to such an advantage still haunted him. The following days were rife with subtle tension. Professors taught their usual lessons on charms, potions, and magical theory, but Harry could feel underlying currents swirling around him. Hermione Granger, an exceptionally bright student from another house, studied him in the library from afar. She never said much anymore, but her eyes spoke volumes. Curiosity, worry, even disappointment. Ron Weasley, who had once shown flashes of friendliness, was openly hostile now, refusing to exchange more than a curt grunt in Harry's presence. Meanwhile, Draco's interest in Harry's secrets grew sharper by the day. In potions, where Snape gave favoritism to Slytherins, Draco would angle his chair toward Harry, silver eyes gleaming. It was as though he sensed Harry's power and wanted either to harness it or tear it down. Yet Draco never pushed too far, aware that behind Harry's cautious demeanor lay the skill and daring needed to command things best left undisturbed. One late afternoon, after a grueling set of classes, Harry crept away from the bustling corridors. He slipped down a series of twisting stairs that led to an abandoned section of the dungeons. His footsteps echoed against damp stone, and the air grew colder with every step. When he finally reached the concealed entrance, his pulse quickened. Tracing his wand along a hidden groove in the wall, he whispered words in a serpentine language that few living souls could decipher. The passage opened, releasing a breath of stale air and a wave of memories. Harry descended carefully, wand light slicing through the darkness. Somewhere, water dripped in a slow, methodical rhythm. Each step carried him deeper into a place that had nearly cost him his life, and had irrevocably changed it. A vast chamber sprawled out ahead, supported by pillars carved into unsettling shapes. He approached, nerves taut, half expecting an enormous silhouette to slither into view. But the basilisk did not immediately appear. The knowledge that he could call it, if he wished, weighed on him like a leaden cloak. He was well aware that controlling such a creature was a moral line few would dare to cross. Yet here he was, standing on that line, perhaps already over it. Harry knelt by a shallow pool at the chamber's centre. His reflection looked back at him, pale and serious, green eyes glittering with uncertainties. He whispered in Parseltongue, voice echoing through the cavern. His heart pounded, waiting to see if the serpent would come. A tense silence followed. Then, from the darkness, a low hiss responded. Goosebumps prickled along Harry's arms. He realized in that moment that he had a choice each and every time he stepped into this chamber, to surrender to the rush of power coiling within these ancient walls, or to walk away from it forever. And each time he chose to return, it became harder to leave that power behind. The serpent's massive form glided just close enough for Harry to sense its presence. He could feel its primal strength in the air. He rose slowly, curling his fingers around his wand. The temptation to see how far he could push his mastery flickered across his mind. A single command, and the creature would obey. A single word, and he could unleash a nightmare. Yet he stood frozen, torn between exhilaration and dread. After a long moment, Harry closed his eyes. He turned away, retracing his steps toward the exit. His hands trembled as he sealed the chamber behind him once again. For now, he had resisted the pull, but he knew it would call to him again, just as it always did. By the time he emerged into the torch-lit corridors of Hogwarts, night had fallen. The castle's walls felt strangely comforting, a protective barrier against the darker impulses stirring in his mind. He wondered how many secrets a single building could hide, and how many more secrets he might discover before the year was out. Harry slipped back into the Slytherin common room, passing Draco in the hallway without a word. He sensed the watchful eyes of classmates who could only guess at what he'd been up to. If they knew the truth, would they hail him as a legend or recoil in horror? That question churned in his thoughts even as he climbed into bed, unsure if he would sleep or lie awake, haunted by the hiss of serpents and the echo of ancient power. Tomorrow promised new lessons and endless speculation. But Harry had peered into the abyss tonight. The line between harnessing darkness and being consumed by it had never felt thinner, and the path ahead was growing ever more treacherous. A fresh dawn broke over the castle, painting the ancient stone walls in hues of muted gold. Harry stirred in his four-poster bed with a sense of restless urgency. The whisper of the chamber's darkness still clung to him, even in the bright morning light. He rose quietly, determined to keep his secrets buried, both the power hidden in the depths below and the lingering questions that plagued him. The day began with an undercurrent of tension throughout the corridors. Students chatted about mysterious rumors that had cropped up overnight, strange noises echoing in the halls, glimpses of slithering shadows. While no one had been harmed, the accounts were enough to unsettle everyone. In the Slytherin common room, several first years looked pale and jumpy. Older students whispered that the castle's recent events might not be so resolved after all. Harry kept his composure, but inside, worry gnawed at him. Had the basilisk moved on its own? Or was something else at play? Breakfast in the Great Hall did little to calm Harry's concerns. The headmaster spoke briefly, mentioning that all students should be vigilant. He offered no details, leaving the entire student body to fester in uncertainty. Across the hall, Hermione Granger's gaze swept over him like a dagger of suspicion. Ron Weasley, seated near her, pointedly avoided looking at Harry altogether, as though the mere act of eye contact could spark confrontation. Draco Malfoy, however, seemed unusually pleasant. He sidled up to Harry before potions class, speaking in a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone. Strange, isn't it? He murmured. The castle is buzzing about some lurking presence, and yet here you are, calm as ever. Harry stiffened, choosing his words carefully. What are you implying, Draco? A slow, calculated smile spread across Draco's face. Nothing at all, only that you seem unruffled by what's got everyone else on edge. He paused to glance around, as though relishing some private joke. You wouldn't happen to know more than you're letting on, would you? Harry's jaw tightened. I focus on what matters, he said curtly. Speculation won't help anyone. Before Draco could reply, Professor Snape swept into the corridor, dark robes trailing behind him. His presence alone was enough to quell any further conversation. Once in the potions classroom, Snape's gaze flickered to Harry, lingering just long enough to convey a silent warning. Ever since last year's events, Snape had become more attentive, less likely to overlook any detail of Harry's conduct. Harry wondered if the professor suspected exactly how far his student had gone. Potions class proceeded with the usual tension. Harry forced himself to concentrate, carefully stirring and measuring ingredients. Nevertheless, Draco's earlier comment clung to his thoughts. The last thing Harry needed was more prying from his housemate, who seemed determined to either befriend or exploit him. Harry wasn't sure which. Across the room, Hermione worked with calm precision, but every so often her eyes darted Harry's way, as though trying to piece together a puzzle only she could see. That afternoon, Harry decided he needed answers. If the basilisk was stirring without his summons, then his grip on it was far more precarious than he realized. Slipping away during a study period, he retraced his steps back to the winding dungeon passages, pressing an ear to the cold, damp walls. Every drip of water and shift of air made his pulse jump. Eventually, he reached the sealed entrance to the chamber. The sense of foreboding nearly overwhelmed him, but he whispered the phrase in parcel tongue, and the stone wall slid aside. Once inside, he ignited his wand, the feeble light trembling against the vast gloom. The chamber seemed unchanged, with towering pillars vanishing into murky shadows. Harry summoned his courage and spoke in the language of serpents. If the basilisk was roaming the castle, he needed to call it back. A low hiss echoed from the darkness, followed by the slow scrape of scales on stone. Relief and anxiety swirled in Harry's chest. The basilisk had not left. It loomed at the chamber's far end, a hulking shape half submerged in the cold blackness. Massive eyes gleamed momentarily, then dipped away, obeying Harry's command not to meet his gaze directly. But even as Harry felt a sense of grim reassurance at its presence, he detected an unsettling agitation in the beast's movements, an undercurrent of restlessness, as though it sensed something beyond his command. He spoke to it softly, calming it, though each hissed syllable felt like treading the edge of a knife. You remain here, he ordered in parcel tongue, and do not roam. Do you understand? The basilisk responded with an obedient hiss, yet its massive coils writhed in discontent. Harry's heart pounded. He had kept the serpent hidden all this time, but something was fraying at the edges of their fragile bond. Stepping back with measured care, Harry eyed the chamber's pillars. Now that he was here, a swirl of curiosity tugged at him. He caught sight of cryptic carvings on the worn stones, arcane symbols that could be instructions, warnings, or even spells lost to time. Part of him wanted to remain and decipher every last marking, to unravel the mysteries behind the founder of this place. Another part of him remembered the swirl of suspicion above ground. If he vanished too long, it would only fuel the rumors. At last he forced himself to leave. Sealing the entrance behind him, Harry emerged into the castle's torchlit hallway with a mix of relief and dread. The basilisk was still under his control, barely. Whatever was causing the odd sensations around the school, it might not be the basilisk at all. Could there be something else awake in the darkness? Or was the serpent simply responding to the potent magic that threaded through Hogwarts, yearning for greater freedom? Those questions weighed on Harry's mind when he nearly collided with Hermione near an archway leading back into the main corridors. She recoiled in surprise, a heavy book clutched to her chest. For a moment, the two stood facing each other without speaking, her face a map of conflicting emotions. Finally, she composed herself. Harry, she began, her tone carefully neutral. There have been rumors about something in the dungeons again. He tried to appear nonchalant. I'm sure the professors are looking into it. Her eyes narrowed, searching his expression. Perhaps, But you know more than you're telling, don't you? Harry stared back, lips pressed together. He couldn't share the truth, not with anyone. Doing so would risk unleashing a panic, or worse, condemnation that might see him expelled. I advise you to be careful where you go at night, he said evenly, sidestepping the question. She opened her mouth as though about to protest, then closed it, a flash of hurt crossing her features. Fine, she said at last, turning sharply and walking away. Harry watched her retreating form until the hallway was empty once more. A pang of guilt twinged in his chest. Hermione's caution came from a genuine place of concern, and perhaps a kernel of desire to protect the school. He wondered fleetingly how much simpler life would be if he trusted her. But that door felt irrevocably closed. The following week passed in a blur of classes, hushed gossip, and subtle shifts in the castle's atmosphere. Draco continued his thinly veiled insinuations, while Snape maintained an intensified vigilance, his dark gaze ever watchful. Twice, Harry caught glimpses of the headmaster pacing the corridors late at night, robes trailing behind in silent contemplation. The tension in the air was palpable, and Harry understood with growing dread that events were converging. Something, or someone, beyond the basilisk was sowing unease. As the day stretched on, Harry found himself returning to the hidden entrance more often, compelled by a mixture of responsibility and fascination. Each time, the basilisk remained at rest, yet an undeniable edginess coursed through its movements, as though it sensed the roiling conflicts within Harry's own mind. Harry began to wonder if he could truly contain this menace. Controlling the creature offered a tantalizing edge, but it demanded constant vigilance and secrecy. Late one evening, as he stood at the threshold of the chamber, he felt a new chill prickle across his skin. There was a sense of being watched. His heart hammered, and he whirled around, wand raised. But the corridor was empty, lit only by the faintest torchlight. Still, that tingling at the back of his neck refused to fade. Something was wrong, and if Harry didn't unravel it soon, all his precarious secrets might come crashing down on him and on Hogwarts. A turbulent night wind rattled the castle's high windows, and a restless quiet settled over the halls. Harry moved with a purposeful stride, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off stone walls. Despite the lateness of the hour, he couldn't sleep. Too many unearthed questions gnawed at him, too many observations that refused to align. For the past week, rumors had spiraled out of control. Students claimed to see a great shadow slithering along corridors. Others whispered about a voice that spoke to them in their dreams. Tension rippled through the dormitories, the Great Hall, and even classrooms. Professors posted stern warnings, yet still, the strange occurrences persisted. Harry had visited the hidden chamber every night, confirming again and again that the basilisk remained in its subterranean lair. Each time the beast's agitated hisses unnerved him. No matter how he soothed it, the basilisk seemed ready to surge forth at the slightest provocation, as though an unseen hand tugged at its leash. One evening, he slipped into an unused classroom to think. Moonlight filtered through tall, arched windows, illuminating drifting dust motes in the still air. He needed to piece this puzzle together. If the basilisk wasn't behind the sightings, then something, or someone, was trying to destabilize Hogwarts. Could it be one of the older Slytherins testing him? Could it be a new threat altogether? Or had Draco finally grown bold enough to orchestrate a more elaborate scheme? Harry's thoughts were interrupted when the door creaked open. Draco stood at the threshold, his expression unreadable in the half-light. They locked eyes, tension sparking in the silence. "I knew you'd be here," Draco said quietly. "You've been restless. Everyone sees it, even if they don't understand why." Harry felt his heart hammer. "Are you following me now?" Draco stepped inside, letting the door fall shut behind him. "I'm gathering information," he replied, his voice a careful whisper. "Information about the things lurking beneath this castle." An instinctive flash of anger heated Harry's cheeks. "If you know something, say it." Draco leaned against a desk, crossing his arms. "Strange, isn't it? We all thought last year's darkness was snuffed out, yet the rumor mill suggests otherwise. Some say you're involved. Others say you're the only one who can stop it. Personally, I think both might be true." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. "I've done nothing to endanger anyone." "Yet you keep sneaking around." Draco's gaze flickered. "I'd wager you've got more power than most can imagine. The question is, What do you plan to do with it, Harry? A taut silence filled the room. Harry found himself balancing on a razor's edge, uncertain whether Draco was trying to corner him or align with him. Before he could formulate a response, an ear-splitting shriek resonated through the corridor. Both boys froze. Another scream followed, this time accompanied by running footsteps. They dashed into the hallway, only to see students in a panic, fleeing toward the main staircase. Chills ran down Harry's spine. He caught the faint echo of a hiss reverberating through the stone walls. It wasn't the low rumble of his basilisk. No, this hiss was sharper, almost mocking, and oddly distant. Exchanging a charged glance with Draco, Harry sprinted after the sound, the pale flicker of wall sconces guiding his way. He expected to find chaos in the corridor, but when he arrived, the passage stood empty. A swirl of leftover dread clung to the air like fog. Harry swallowed hard. The hush that followed felt more ominous than any outcry. Draco, panting from the run, stared at Harry with disbelief. "You heard that, right?" Draco demanded. Harry nodded, heart still pounding. It wasn't mine. He didn't clarify that he had a basilisk under his command. Draco's brow furrowed, as though he were trying to decipher a puzzle with missing pieces. Footsteps thundered behind them as Snape appeared around the corner. His wand was drawn, and his dark eyes snapped from Draco to Harry. "Return to your dormitories," Snape barked, voice low and urgent. "It's not safe to be wandering at this hour." Without waiting for a reply, he swept down the corridor, cloak billowing. Harry glanced at Draco once more. The unspoken question lingered. If the basilisk was in the chamber, what in this castle could produce such a blood-curdling sound? Back in the Slytherin common room, Harry found no solace. Students huddled in small clusters, eyes darting nervously. Murmurs of ghosts, curses, and malevolent forces circulated like wildfire. Ignoring the stares, Harry pushed past them, heading straight for his dormitory. He needed answers, and only one place could provide them. That night, long after the common room fell silent, Harry stole away. He navigated secret corridors by memory, each turn bringing him deeper into the bowels of Hogwarts. When he reached the familiar stone wall, he exhaled and whispered the command in parcel tongue, heart hammering in anticipation. Entering the chamber felt different this time. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavier, and the temperature seemed colder. He raised his wand, light spreading over the stone pillars. Somewhere in the darkness, the basilisk stirred, its ancient scales scraping the floor. Yet before Harry could greet it, he heard something else, a second set of hisses. Ice seemed to flow through Harry's veins. The basilisk slithered into view, enormous and formidable. But behind one of the pillars, a shape flickered, a dark silhouette. With a heartbeat of sheer terror, Harry realized it was a figure clad in robes, whispering in a language as ancient as the serpent's slithering mind. "Who's there?" Harry shouted, adrenaline surging. The figure snapped its head around, face obscured by the gloom. The basilisk growled, torn between two competing calls, Harry's bond and this intruder's orders. Its body coiled with uncertainty, eyes flickering dangerously. Even with the protective enchantment that kept it from striking him outright, Harry felt its primal energy crackle in the dank air. A hollow laugh reverberated against the chamber walls. "Did you truly think you were the only one to claim the darkness beneath Hogwarts?" The words were no more than a murmur, but each syllable dripped with malice. Harry's mind raced. Someone else must have uncovered part of the chamber's secrets. Someone who could mimic or manipulate the arcane language that controlled the serpent. He felt the basilisk pulling away from him, its loyalty fracturing. Drawing his wand, Harry stepped forward, ignoring the tremor in his hands. "You don't know what you're unleashing," he warned, voice tense with fury. "Back away from it." "Unleashing?" The laugh came again, sharper. "I am simply guiding what you've already awakened." Before Harry could protest, the intruder hissed a command. The basilisk roared, snapping its massive jaws inches from Harry. Fear coursed through him, but he held his ground, recalling the bond he'd forged. "No," he ordered in Parseltongue, voice cracking with the strain. "You obey me. Remember who commands you." The serpent lashed its tail, smashing through a stone pillar in a shower of rubble. Harry threw himself aside, heart thundering, desperate to reassert control. He poured every ounce of willpower into his next command. For a moment, the basilisk faltered, torn between voices. Harry could sense the predator's mind balancing on a knife's edge. "It's too late," the hooded figure taunted, stepping deeper into the gloom. Power does not serve one master alone. You have no idea what you've set in motion. Snarling, Harry locked eyes, locked stares, on the serpent's looming head, forcing as much authority into his words as possible. "Stand down," he shouted in Parseltongue, ignoring the twisted pain in his scarred conscience, the knowledge that he was teetering on the boundary between dominion and enslavement. In a mind-shattering moment, the basilisk froze. Then, slowly, it lowered its head, ceding to Harry's command. The intruder cursed under their breath. Harry seized the chance, launching a powerful, stunning spell in their direction. Lightning arced through the chamber, striking the figure's side. With an unearthly shriek, they crumpled to the floor in a swirl of robes. Panting, Harry approached, wand drawn. The basilisk remained coiled behind him, a silent, menacing sentinel. He reached for the intruder's hood, but before he could pull it back, the figure stirred and vanished in a swirl of dark magic, almost as though the very shadows had swallowed them whole. A sharp gust of wind rattled the chamber doors, and then there was nothing but rubble, dust, and the thunder of Harry's pulse. He sank to his knees, breath ragged. Whoever that was, they had nearly stolen control of the basilisk, and perhaps the entire castle's fate. With trembling hands, he placed a steadying palm on the serpent's hide. The beast was still tense, muscles quivering under its scales. "We are not finished here," he whispered in Parseltongue, voice echoing in the ancient hall. "But tonight we rest." The serpent's eyes narrowed, a lingering resentment gleaming in their depths. Harry realized that his hold had been shaken, the basilisk's loyalty frayed. He stood, one light illuminating the broken pillar and the collapsed debris. The chamber had been violated by someone with knowledge nearly equal to his own, and that fact rippled through him like a warning toll. By the time Harry made it back to his dormitory, dawn's first light tinted the horizon. Exhaustion tugged at him, but sleep felt like a distant luxury. His mind churned with endless questions. Who was the intruder? How had they learned to speak the basilisk's language? And most urgently, how could he protect Hogwarts, keep his secrets, and master a power that seemed increasingly impossible to contain? Collapsing onto his bed, he stared at the canopy above, heart still racing. The year was far from over, and the battle for the castle's hidden darkness had just begun. For now, he had held his throne as the Master of Serpents. But in a world where ambition and shadows collided, Harry suspected that true victory and true peace would remain just beyond his grasp. He closed his eyes, one final thought flickering through his weary mind. The basilisk might still answer his call, but that tenuous obedience might not hold forever. Someone else, someone dangerous, had found a way into its mind. If Harry was to survive the storms ahead, he would need every shred of cunning, every drop of courage, and perhaps the faint spark of conscience that he still harbored deep within. Because in this new reality, no one was safe, and every secret might yet be Harry's undoing.